Everyone at the party was celebrating. The music, the laughter, the perfect couple. But Nora just caught something nobody else did, and she couldn't unsee it. Emma was the happiest she'd ever been. The dress, the venue, the date, all set, but a deposit had vanished, and the vendors swore they were never paid. He told the story so smoothly. Everyone believed him. But Nora had heard a different version last week. Same man. Two completely different lives. One name led to another, then to a woman from years ago. And the closer Nora looked, the more she realized. Emma had no idea who she was about to marry. But when Nora tried to warn her, Daniel got there first. "She's just jealous," he said. And just like that, Emma stopped listening to her best friend. The wedding was about to begin. Nora had the truth in her hand. One envelope, one chance. Walk in and stop it, or stay silent forever. 10 minutes. That's all she had. Inside that hall, the ceremony was about to begin. Nora pressed herself against the wall, a folded note crushed in her hand, her heart pounding so loud she could barely think. Down the corridor, she could hear the music starting. Everyone was smiling in there, everyone except her, because Nora knew something nobody else did. And once she said it out loud, there was no taking it back. And there was Emma, the happiest girl in the world, supposedly. The dress was perfect. The flowers, the venue, everything she'd ever dreamed of. But look closer. Her smile faded for just a second as she looked down at those roses. A tiny voice she kept telling herself to ignore. In a few hours, she'd be married to the man she loved. At least, that's what she believed. She had no idea what was coming. Okay, so back up. 3 weeks before all this. Emma showed up at Nora's place out of breath. Didn't even knock, just barged in, waving her left hand around like it was on fire. There was a ring on it. "He asked me," she kept saying. "He actually asked me." And Nora, she cried a little, honestly. They'd been roommates since first year, practically sisters. Daniel seemed fine back then. Better than fine. Nobody saw it coming. Nora threw herself into it. Maid of honor duties, full speed ahead. Decorations, guest lists, late-night planning sessions with way too much coffee. The engagement party was beautiful. Everyone was smiling. Emma kept saying she couldn't have done it without her. And for a while, it really did feel like a fairy tale. Nora was happy to be part of it. She had no reason to think twice. Not yet, anyway. That's when Nora really met Daniel. Firm handshake, warm smile, all the right words. He remembered her name, asked about her classes, complimented the decorations. Charming, almost too charming. And then, just for a second, something flickered. His smile stayed. But his eyes went somewhere else. Cold, calculating. Then it was gone. Nora told herself she imagined it. But that little splinter? It stayed with her. The first crack showed up on a Tuesday. They were going over the wedding budget, just routine stuff. But one number didn't add up. A deposit, a big one, was gone. Emma frowned at the screen. Maybe I paid it from the other account. She wasn't sure. Nora wasn't either. They laughed it off. Wedding chaos, right? Money slips through the cracks. But Nora made a mental note, just in case. Then came the florist. Nora stopped by to confirm the order. Easy task, 10 minutes tops. Except the woman behind the counter just stared at her. "We never received a payment," she said. "The booking was canceled weeks ago." Nora blinked. That made no sense. Emma had shown her the confirmation herself. So who canceled it? And where did the money go? 2 cracks now, and they were starting to look connected. That night, at dinner, Daniel told a story about his old job in Chicago. Funny story, everyone laughed. But Nora froze, fork halfway to her mouth. Because 2 weeks ago, he'd told the exact same story, except that time it happened in Denver. Different city, different year. Same story, word for word. Maybe he misspoke. People mix things up. But Nora had a really good memory, and the way he said it felt rehearsed. So Nora did what any curious person would do. She looked him up. Just a quick search, nothing serious. But the more she scrolled, the weirder it got. An old address that didn't match what he'd said. A name spelled slightly differently. A profile that seemed to appear out of nowhere 2 years ago. Like Daniel just started existing. Nora leaned back. Okay. Now she was actually worried. Neck did. Nora barely slept that night. She kept telling herself there was a reason for all of it. People have messy pasts. Maybe Daniel was just private. Maybe she was being paranoid, looking for problems that weren't there. But deep down, she knew. You don't get this many coincidences by accident. Something was wrong with the man her best friend was about to marry. And Nora was the only one who saw it, So Nora stopped guessing and started writing things down. Old habit from her research classes. Spread everything out on the kitchen table one morning. Bank confirmations, vendor emails, the booking receipts Emma had forwarded her. And she just started lining them up, side by side, looking for the thing that didn't fit. It didn't take long. The deposit Emma swore she paid? It went out, sure. But not to the venue. To some account Nora didn't recognize. The florist money? Same thing. Different name on the receipt than the one on the actual invoice. Small stuff, the kind of thing you'd never notice unless you were really, really looking. Nora was really looking. She made a little chart. 3 columns. What Emma believed, what the paperwork said, and the gap in between. And that gap kept getting bigger every time she added a line. Honestly, part of her was hoping she'd find a boring explanation. A typo, a mix-up, anything. But you know how it is. Once you see a pattern, you can't unsee it. Every receipt told the same quiet little lie, and all of them pointed in the same direction, toward Daniel. Nora sat back and stared at that notebook for a long time. Then she grabbed her laptop. Rachel almost didn't reply. Nora found out later she'd typed and deleted a response like 5 times. But she came. A little cafe halfway between their cities. Corner table. 2 coffees neither of them really drank. And then Rachel told her everything. It started the same way. Charming, attentive. The kind of man who remembers your sister's birthday and shows up with the exact coffee you like. He moved fast, talked about the future early, made Rachel feel like the luckiest person alive. Then the money stuff started. Slow at first. A loan here, a temporary account transfer there. Always with a good reason. Always paid back until the day it wasn't. By the time Rachel noticed, her savings were gone. The business she'd built, buried under bills she didn't even make. And then he just left. Different name, probably. New city, new start. Nora listened to all of it with her hands wrapped around a cold cup, because it wasn't just similar to Emma's situation. It was identical. Same playbook, same lines, same slow drain, dressed up as love. Rachel looked at her and asked the question Nora was dreading. He's doing it again, isn't he? Nora couldn't even answer. She just nodded. And Rachel closed her eyes. 2 nights to find a name. Rachel, the woman from the photo. Nora's not a detective, wants that clear. She just had a laptop, too much coffee, and a bad feeling she couldn't shake. So, the boring stuff. Cross-reference the photo, matched a tagged location, an old comment with a first name, then a last name, then a city a few hours out. And the more she dug, worse it got. Rachel used to run a small business, little online shop, handmade things. Nora found the page. Frozen, though. Last post over a year back. And those last few updates, they got strange. Apologies to customers, orders she couldn't fill, a note about going through something hard, having to step away. Then nothing. Silence. Nora sat there in the dark, only light off the screen. Kept thinking about Emma, the missing deposits. A man who told the same story in 2 different cities. A woman whose whole life fell apart right around the time Daniel disappeared from her photos. One name, one pattern. Nora took a breath and started writing to a complete stranger. Rachel almost didn't reply. Nora found out later she'd typed and deleted a response like 5 times. But she came. A little cafe halfway between their cities. Corner table. 2 coffees neither of them really drank. And then Rachel told her everything. It started the same way. Charming, attentive. The kind of man who remembers your sister's birthday and shows up with the exact coffee you like. He moved fast, talked about the future early, made Rachel feel like the luckiest person alive. Then the money stuff started, slow at first. A loan here, a temporary account transfer there. Always with a good reason, always paid back, until the day it wasn't. By the time Rachel noticed, her savings were gone. The business she'd built, buried under bills she didn't even make. And then he just left. Different name, probably. New city, new start. Nora listened to all of it with her hands wrapped around a cold cup, because it wasn't just similar to Emma's situation. It was identical. Same playbook, same lines, same slow drain, dressed up as love. Rachel looked at her and asked the question Nora was dreading. He's doing it again, isn't he? Nora couldn't even answer. She just nodded. And Rachel closed her eyes. Nora didn't go straight home after that. She drove around for a while, just to think. Because now she knew, really knew, and knowing made everything heavier, not easier. Funny how that works. She had the receipts, she had Rachel, she had a pattern so clear you could draw it on a napkin. The man Emma was marrying in less than 2 weeks had done this before, to a woman who was still picking up the pieces. So just tell Emma, right? Easy. Except it wasn't. Nora sat on her bedroom floor that night, running through it over and over. If she told Emma, Emma might not believe her. People in love don't want to hear this stuff. And Daniel was good. Smooth. He'd have an answer for everything. He always did. Worse, if Nora got it even slightly wrong, she'd be the bad guy. The jealous friend trying to ruin the happiest day of Emma's life. She could lose Emma completely, over what might sound out loud like a crazy theory. But if she said nothing? Emma walks down that aisle straight into the same trap that flattened Rachel. There wasn't a safe choice here. Just a choice. And Nora was the only one who could make it. Here's the thing about people like Daniel. They notice. He clocked it before Nora said a single word. It was at one of the pre-wedding dinners. Nora had been quieter than usual, watching him a little too carefully, asking questions that were maybe 1 degree too specific. About his old jobs, his old cities, And Daniel? He smiled through all of it. But his eyes changed. He cornered her by the hallway when no one was looking, still smiling, still using that warm, easy voice. But the words underneath were different. "You've been busy," he said, asking a lot of questions. Nora played it cool, said she was just being a thorough maid of honor. He laughed, light and friendly, for anyone who might be watching. Then he leaned in just a little. "Emma's really happy right now," he said. "It'd be a shame if someone made this complicated for her." And there it was. Not a threat exactly. Nothing you could repeat and have it sound bad. Just a soft, smiling warning from a man who'd clearly done this dance before. Nora's heart was pounding. But she held his gaze and didn't blink. Because now she understood something important. He wasn't worried about being wrong. He was worried about being caught. Daniel didn't wait for Nora to make her move. He made his first. That same week, he sat Emma down, took her hands, did the whole worried fiancé routine. And he was good at it. You have to give him that. He told Emma he was scared to bring it up, that he didn't want to cause problems between her and her best friend. But he'd noticed some things. Nora acting strange, snooping around, asking weird questions about his past. He said maybe, just maybe, Nora wasn't as happy about the wedding as she pretended to be. "Some people can't stand to see you move on," he said softly. "I think she might be jealous." Jealous, that one word. He planted it so gently, Emma didn't even feel it go in. And look, Emma didn't want to believe it. At first she defended Nora, said no way, Nora would never. But Daniel didn't push. He just looked sad and said he hoped he was wrong, which is the oldest trick there is. Let the doubt do the work for you. By the end of that conversation, a tiny seed was planted. The next time Nora acted a little off, Emma wouldn't think, "What's wrong?" She'd think, maybe Daniel was right. And that was exactly the point. Nora finally tried to say something at the dress fitting. Worst possible place, honestly. But she couldn't wait anymore. The wedding was 8 days out. She kept it gentle, didn't accuse anyone of anything. Just said she'd found some stuff about Daniel that worried her, and asked Emma to please just look at it. That's all. Just look. Emma went stiff, cold in a way Nora had never seen from her. "Daniel said you'd do this," she said quietly. And that stopped Nora cold, because she realized he'd gotten there first. Of course he had. Emma's voice was shaking. She said she didn't understand why Nora couldn't just be happy for her. Why she had to dig up some random ex and turn it into a conspiracy. She said maybe Nora needed to take a step back from the wedding. Maybe from her for a while. Nora tried one more time, held out her phone with the screenshots right there. But Emma wouldn't even look down. She just turned toward the mirror, toward that beautiful white dress, and went silent. The fitting lady pretended not to hear any of it. Nora stood there with her arms still out, phone in her hand, watching her best friend choose to believe a stranger over her. And she didn't know how to fix it. For a couple of days, Nora really did think about quitting. Just showing up, smiling, handing over the rings, keeping her mouth shut. It would have been easier. Nobody would be mad at her. Then Rachel called. She'd been checking in, said she could hear it in Nora's voice, that flat, tired sound people get right before they give up. And Rachel wasn't having it. She drove over, sat down on Nora's couch, put a hand on her shoulder, and said the thing Nora needed to hear. I didn't have anyone, Rachel told her. When it happened to me, there was no one in my corner. No friend doing what you're doing right now. Emma does. She just doesn't know it yet. And that kind of cracked something open in Nora. Because she'd been so focused on Emma being angry, she forgot she wasn't actually alone in this. Rachel had lived it. Rachel believed her, completely. They talked for hours about what to do, about how Daniel always stayed 2 steps ahead, how he twisted everything, how he turned people against each other. And slowly, the two of them stopped feeling like victims and started feeling like a team. By the time Rachel left, Nora wasn't thinking about quitting anymore. She was thinking about how to win. For a couple of days, Nora really did think about quitting. Just showing up, smiling, handing over the rings, keeping her mouth shut. It would have been easier. Nobody would be mad at her. Then Rachel called. She'd been checking in, said she could hear it in Nora's voice, that flat, tired sound people get right before they give up. And Rachel wasn't having it. She drove over, sat down on Nora's couch, put a hand on her shoulder, and said the thing Nora needed to hear. I didn't have anyone, Rachel told her. When it happened to me, there was no one in my corner. No friend doing what you're doing right now. Emma does. She just doesn't know it yet. And that kind of cracked something open in Nora. Because she'd been so focused on Emma being angry, she forgot she wasn't actually alone in this. Rachel had lived it. Rachel believed her, completely. They talked for hours about what to do, about how Daniel always stayed 2 steps ahead, how he twisted everything, how he turned people against each other. And slowly, the two of them stopped feeling like victims and started feeling like a team. By the time Rachel left, Nora wasn't thinking about quitting anymore. She was thinking about how to win. The day came too fast. It always does. Nora pulled into the venue parking lot with Rachel in the passenger seat and her heart going about 100 miles an hour. The place was beautiful. White flowers everywhere, soft music drifting out the open doors, guests in their nice clothes laughing on the lawn. Picture perfect. The kind of wedding people dream about. And Nora was about to walk in there and try to stop it. She'd thought about a dozen quieter ways to do this. Catch Emma in the morning, slip her a note, get one of the bridesmaids to help. But every single plan ran into the same wall. Daniel. He was always around, always watching, always ready to smooth things over before they started. So this was it. The folder under her arm had everything. The receipts, the photo, Rachel's records, all of it. Rachel reached over and squeezed her hand once before they got out of the car. Didn't say anything. Didn't need to. They walked in together. 2 women in the middle of a crowd that had no idea what was coming. Nora kept her eyes forward and her steps steady. Inside, somewhere past all those flowers, her best friend was getting ready to make the worst mistake of her life. Nora found the bridal suite at the end of a quiet hallway. She could hear voices behind the door. Emma's, a couple of the bridesmaids, laughing about something, happy. And Nora just stood there for a second, hand raised, not knocking, because she knew what was on the other side. The second she walked in with this folder, everything changed. Maybe Emma would listen. Maybe she'd scream at her to get out. Maybe security would walk Nora to the parking lot in front of every guest. She really didn't know. What she did know was that she'd never forgive herself if she didn't try. Not after Rachel, not after everything. She thought about all the years. Emma holding her hair back after a bad night freshman year. Emma showing up with soup when Nora was sick. Emma being the first person to clap at her graduation, louder than anyone. That was the friendship she was about to risk. Maybe lose for good. But that was also exactly why she had to do it. You don't let the people you love walk off a cliff just to keep the peace. Nora took one slow breath, steadied her hand, and she knocked Raud that had no idea what was coming. Nora kept her eyes forward and her steps steady. Inside, somewhere past all those flowers, her best friend was getting ready to make the worst mistake of her life. Emma's face fell the second she saw who it was. "Nora, not today, please." She turned back toward the mirror. "Whatever this is, I can't—" "2 minutes," Nora said. "That's all I'm asking. 2 minutes, and if you still want me to leave, I'll go. I won't say another word. I promise." Something in her voice made Emma stop. Maybe it was the shaking. Maybe it was the fact that Nora had never begged for anything in her life. Emma waved the bridesmaids out of the room, crossed her arms. 2 minutes. So Nora laid it out, fast but clear. The deposits that went to accounts nobody recognized. The vendor who was never paid. The story Daniel told in 2 different cities. And then the photo. Rachel. The whole pattern, piece by piece, right there in Emma's hands. She watched her best friend's face change. The annoyance first, then confusion, then this slow, awful dawning as the pieces clicked into place, things Emma had brushed off for months suddenly lining up into something she couldn't unsee. "He told me you'd do this," Emma whispered. But her voice wasn't angry anymore. It was scared. "I know he did," Nora said gently. "That's how I knew I was right." And Emma's hand started to tremble. Of course Daniel showed up. People like him always sense when they're losing a room. He filled the doorway in that perfect suit, took one look at the papers in Emma's hands, and switched on the charm, like flipping a light. "Babe, what's going on? Why is she even in here?" Reached for Emma. Soft voice, easy smile. Same routine that had worked 100 times. This time she stepped back. "Is it true?" Small voice. "The accounts, the money, the other woman." Daniel laughed. Came out wrong, though. Thin. "You're really going to believe this? On our wedding day? She's jealous, Em. I told you." "Stop!" Her voice cracked. "Just answer me. Yes or no?" And for 1 second, the mask slipped. Warm eyes went flat. Cold. Same look Nora had caught months back at that first party. The real one. He covered fast. Talking faster now, explanations tumbling out. This account, that misunderstanding, a story for everything. But it was too much. Too smooth. Too rehearsed. And Emma was hearing it now. Really hearing it. Nora stepped in beside her, quiet but solid. Whatever came next, Emma wasn't facing him alone. Daniel was still talking when a new voice cut through the room. "Hello, Daniel." Everyone turned. Rachel stood in the doorway, calm, steady, looking right at him. And whatever color was left in his face just drained away. Because here's the thing about a lie that big. You can argue with paper. You can call screenshots fake, call Nora jealous, spin a story for every single receipt. But you can argue with a woman standing in the doorway whose life you took apart. You can't explain her away. "You remember me?" Rachel said quietly. "Good. Because I remember everything." She didn't yell. She didn't have to. She just told Emma the truth, plainly. Same promises, same accounts, same slow drain that left her with nothing. Right down to the little details Daniel used on every woman, the coffee he memorized, the future he painted, the way he made you feel chosen right before he emptied you out. Emma listened to all of it with tears running down her face. And then she looked at Daniel. Really looked. And Nora watched the last piece of the fantasy fall away from her best friend's eyes. Daniel opened his mouth one more time. Emma held up her hand. "Don't," she said. "Just don't." It was over. He just didn't know it yet. Emma walked out to face her guests herself. Nobody made her. She just did it. A whole room full of people, all dressed up, all waiting for a wedding. And Emma stood at the front of it in her dress and told them, with her voice shaking but steady, that there wasn't going to be one. Not today. Not to this man. She didn't give them the whole story. She didn't owe anyone that. She just said she'd learned some things she couldn't ignore, and that she was grateful to find out now instead of later. You could hear a pin drop. Then a few people started to cry. Her mom rushed up and wrapped her in a hug. And through all of it, Emma kept her chin up. Nora stood off to the side, watching her best friend do the bravest thing she'd ever seen her do. Calling off your own wedding in front of everyone takes a kind of strength most people never have to find. And the best part? Emma found Nora's eyes across that room, and she mouthed 2 words, "Thank you." After everything, the cold shoulder, the doubt, the awful dress-fitting fight. 2 words. And just like that, Nora felt the weight of the last few weeks start to lift. Later that evening, after the guests had gone and the flowers were getting packed away, the 2 of them sat down together. Just Emma and Nora. Like old times. Emma cried. A lot. Not about Daniel, really. More about how close she'd come, and about how she'd treated Nora these last few weeks. She kept apologizing, over and over, until Nora finally just pulled her into a hug and told her to stop. "You don't have to be sorry," Nora said. "He's good at what he does. That's the whole point. He's supposed to fool you." "But he didn't fool you," Emma said. "Yeah, well." Nora gave a tired little smile. "I've also never been in love with him. Easy to see clearly from the outside." They talked for hours. About everything. The little red flags Emma had ignored. The way Daniel had slowly pulled her away from her friends. How she'd started doubting her own instincts. Classic stuff looking back. Obvious almost. But never obvious when you're the one inside it. And somewhere in that long conversation, the friendship just clicked back into place. Stronger, honestly. Because Emma knew now, without a doubt, exactly the kind of friend Nora was. The kind who'd risk everything to keep you safe. A few days after, the 3 of them met up. Nora, Emma, and Rachel. Same little cafe where this whole thing started, actually. It was Emma's idea. She wanted to thank Rachel in person. And honestly, she wanted to apologize too, even though she didn't have to. Because Rachel was the one who walked back into the worst memory of her life, just to keep it from happening to a stranger. Rachel waved it off. Said helping Emma was the first time, in a long time, that what happened to her felt like it meant something. Like it wasn't just pain for nothing. The 3 of them sat there for a couple of hours, and it was lighter than you'd think. There was even some laughing. 3 women who'd all crossed paths with the same man, sitting together on the other side of it. Okay. Before they left, Rachel said something Nora never forgot. She said for years she'd felt stupid for not seeing it sooner. Ashamed, even. But sitting there, watching Emma get out in time because someone refused to stay quiet, She finally understood it was never her fault. It was never any of their faults. Some people are just really good at lying, and the only thing that beats them is people who refuse to look away. Emma took some time after that. You don't bounce back from almost marrying a con artist overnight. Anyone who tells you otherwise is lying. There were hard days. Days she didn't want to get out of bed. Days she'd be totally fine, laughing even. And then some little thing would hit her, a song, a restaurant they used to go to, and she'd go quiet for an hour. She got angry too. At him, sure. But mostly at herself for missing it. For ignoring the stuff that, looking back, was kind of obvious. Nora kept telling her to ease up on that part. You didn't miss it because you're dumb, she'd say. You missed it because you trusted someone. That's not a flaw. That's just being a person. But here's the thing. This time Emma wasn't doing it alone. Nora checked in constantly, annoyingly even. Random texts, surprise coffees, just showing up. And Rachel stayed in the picture too, which nobody saw coming. The two of them got close, actually. Weird little friendship born out of the worst possible thing. And slowly, piece by piece, Emma came back. She started painting again. Picked the hiking back up, those long Saturday trails she'd quietly dropped somewhere along the way without even noticing. Reconnected with friends she'd drifted from while she was with him. One afternoon, walking across campus, she said something that stuck with Nora. She said she used to think the scariest thing in the world was ending up alone. That's why she held on so tight, even when something felt off. Turns out, she said, the scariest thing is almost disappearing just to keep someone who was never really there. Then she bumped Nora's shoulder. Anyway, better taste in best friends than fiancés, clearly. They both lost it laughing. People keep calling Nora a hero now. She hates it, like visibly cringes when someone says it, because that's not how it felt. Not even a little. From the inside, it was just weeks of stomach aches and second-guessing and lying awake at 3 a.m. wondering if she was the crazy one. There was no big brave music playing. Just a girl with a folder and a really bad feeling she couldn't put down. And honestly, she almost didn't say anything. That's the part nobody talks about. There was a whole week where she'd basically decided to shut up, hand over the rings, smile for the photos, let it go. Way easier. Nobody yells at the friend who keeps quiet. What changed her mind wasn't some big dramatic moment. It was Rachel, sitting on that couch, saying she'd had no one. That's it. That's the whole thing. One sentence from a stranger who'd lived the worst version of this already. See? Here's what Nora figured out through all of it. Everybody loves the idea of speaking up, standing up for people, doing the right thing. Sounds great on a poster, right? But in real life, doing the right thing usually shows up looking like the wrong thing. It looks like you ruining a wedding. It looks like your best friend going cold on you for 2 weeks. It looks like people you barely know whispering that you're jealous. Bitter. Trying to wreck somebody's happiness. Nobody claps for you in the moment. They clap later, if you're lucky. And some days you don't get the clap at all. You just get to live with knowing you did it anyway. She still thinks about how close it came. How the truth almost just didn't make it out. How one quiet choice, made by one exhausted person who'd barely slept, changed where a whole life was headed. Emma's doing great now, by the way. Back to painting. Back to those weekend hikes she'd quietly given up. Laughs easier than she has in years. She and Rachel even text sometimes, which still makes Nora smile. And that's enough. That's more than enough. Some weddings just aren't supposed to happen. This was one of them.